Hello there everybody. Welcome to the MCAT ACE lecture for General Chemistry, and in this lecture we're going to be covering the periodic table and the different element families that are found within the periodic table. So I've got an outline here to talk about what this video lecture is going to cover. Specifically, as we just mentioned, we're going to talk about the elemental families, and this is going to be broken down by valence electrons. So for instance, you go down the first row, all of the first elements would have one valence electron. The second row, two valence electrons, so on and so forth. And they all have various properties according to that, especially the metals. So we'd like to break this down into three major sections. And when you look at the periodic table, you can break it down into metals, metalloids, and nonmetals. So most people know about metals and nonmetals. However, metalloids are a very select few set of elements that sort of ride the line between metals and nonmetals, and they have unique properties that carry them in between those two groups. So for the metals, if we were to break it down, you have alkali metals, alkaline earth metals, transition metals, and then those big ones that are at the very bottom of the periodic table are known as the lanthanide and the actinide series. Those are also metals, although they are far less common in terms of their use both in studies as well as in actuality in the real world. We tend to come across a lot more of the alkali metals, the alkaline earth metals, and the transition metals. We will discuss the metalloids and take a look at them. They include things like boron, germanium, a couple others that are in there. And then the nonmetals, the most commonly known ones are carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen, including all other elements in those families. So, for instance, the carbon family would also contain silicon, the nitrogen family would contain phosphorus, and the oxygen family would contain sulfur, all of which are important elements in the human body and in most biochemical pathways slash chemicals that you would come across, reagents. You then have the halogens, slightly less common, but still very, very prevalent and important, especially when you deal with chloride, because you're talking about sodium chloride, when you're taking in certain electrolytes. You also have iodine, which is another very important nutrient. And then finally, we have the noble gases all the way at the end of the periodic table. They are rather inert, and they are not reactive. So that is what we are going to be looking at during this lecture. We're going to break it down. First we'll talk about metals, metalloids, and nonmetals and the difference between them. And then we'll take a look at some of the individual families and what would separate them or make them different from the others.